So the next item on the agenda is a little bit different. We're going to have a peering panel on the future of peering in the Nordics. And so I would like to invite the four panelists to come to the stage. And as they come, I'll introduce them in order. First up, Hugge Korsbäck, network architect from Nordinet and Sunet. Then we have Karlsson, head of engineering at NetNod. Alexander Wågberg, backbone engineer at Comhem. And last on the stage was Puygrenier, I hope I got that right, Director of Strategy and Business Development, Connectivity, Interaction. Please welcome our panelists to the stage. So the format for this panel is going to be, I'm going to ask some questions to the panel, and we're going to listen to the panel discuss the questions themselves, but we have some time at the end for questions, so there will be time to put some questions or some comments from you. But if you do feel provoked, if you feel you have anything you want to say, that's great, but please wait for the question section at the end. Okay, if that's clear, then we'll get going. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for being part of the panel. Just a sort of general question to start, and whoever wants to jump in, just feel free to jump in. What do you think is driving peering today? Where do we see the majority of traffic coming from? And moving forward, where might the peering community like to see more traffic coming from?
Is that me, I guess? Well, yeah, by the way, thanks for accepting my self-invitation to this, because I wasn't invited in the beginning, so I just invited myself. Well, I mean, it's quite obvious, right, that essentially 90% of the traffic a regular ISP has goes to like 1% of the internet. So if you take away 10 ISPs from the internet, you probably lose like 90% of your traffic in any general ISP out there. So that is at least my view on it. I mean, I represent an educational carrier, which looks pretty much like any other ISP in general. So I think my assumption is pretty correct. I'm not sure. Alex also runs an ISP, so.
Yeah, I'm working with Comhem. We mostly have residential customers, basically 99% of our customers. We can see that the majority of our traffic comes from the 5 big CDNs, since we're an eyeball. And basically, if you remove those 5 CDNs, we have almost 0 traffic left.
Yeah, and I have the same. I would extend it to maybe 10, but those 10, I mean, the last 2 years has changed quite a lot. That these CDNs or these content distributors, they kind of aggregate themselves together. So, for example, I mean, Netflix, Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, Google, Facebook, they're regular suspects, right? So, and the good thing here is that peering has never been easier than it is today, because these companies are very, very flexible to work with, which are good. But it's also part of their business, of course, to make sure that their bits gets flowed unhindered into everyone's network. So peering is super easy these days. It was probably a lot harder 10 years ago when I wasn't around. I mean, when you had to deal with telcos, because, you know, I've been involved in the peering scene for, I think, 4 years. You know, 4 years ago, everyone was like, oh, I need to get a peering with Deutsche Telekom. Nowadays, like, who gives a shit, right? I mean, like, for a regular telco to peer with another telco, it's so little traffic, it's almost uninteresting to even think about it. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's how it is.
So question from, obviously, a data center company. So do you see the roles of telco completely removed away from the peering world?
Well, of course not, because the telco still has the customers, right? But the telco-to-telco interaction is getting less and less interesting. I mean, for example, I have 0 growth to any telco in Sweden or any telco abroad. It's essentially the same traffic levels I had since forever. But my traffic to Amazon, that's doubling every 6 months. So obviously, that's where I have to put my focus and not trying to chase after a pair with Deutsche Telekom.
So that's why the telcos are all buying ISPs to make sure that they have the eyeballs at the end. Is that?
More or less, yeah. Then, of course, we don't have any CDNs on the panel here, but they obviously need to do what we did 5 years ago. They need to chase after the telcos to make sure that their bits gets injected into the networks as cost-effective as possible.
Yeah, first of all, I definitely have to agree, and I'm old enough to actually been one of the content providers in the old days where I used to work in like 15 years ago for Bredbandsbolaget, where all the at that time all the content was actually the BitTorrent traffic coming from the end users. But today there is basically either you are a content provider or you're an eyeball provider, or you can try to be both, but typically not. So yeah.
I can just add that this kind of eliminates the need of transit. I think Geoff Houston talked about this on a couple of conferences, that transit level is just going down, and it's hard to keep up and sell transit because the content you want to reach is basically located at a CDN, and those are pretty easy to work and communicate with and get cross connects and everything.
Yeah, I guess that's always been a popular subject, right? That transit is dead, and for a big ISP, I mean, I represent something that might be like a tier 2 if we use that legacy definition of stuff. I mean, if I lose all transit, I think I would really hard time noticing that they will actually went away. I mean, it has happened a few times that our transit did something weird and we lost traffic, but no one actually reported it back to us because the only traffic we do over transit today is BitTorrent traffic to Vietnam. And it's like, all right. I mean, someone might get upset, but they don't fault report that stuff, right? Then, of course, if you're a small player, transit still is very, very important, and it is very cost effective because, you know, a really good transit network, they probably exit 90% of the traffic inside the router where you were connected. I mean, that is what every big tier 1 wants to do, right? That they never put any traffic on the backbone ever. So they just loop the traffic local in the router, and that is what you want to have cheap. So of course you can sell cheap transit.
Okay, going to move on to the next question. A bit more specific. This is to everyone on the panel. What factors do you think are needed to create and enable an excellent peering location? And more specifically, what does Stockholm need to do to stay amongst the top peering locations in Europe?
All right, I'll start then. Yeah, so I don't want to talk about Stockholm here because now Stockholm is already a very relevant place. We have all the CDNs, we have all the telcos is here. What I want to focus on is to have other places than Stockholm be relevant. Because now, if we were to put a very, very small nuke, which you can buy on eBay these days, on Stockholm, I mean, there is no Swedish internet left. So that is something we need to address and something we need to fix in the future. That of course, Stockholm needs to be relevant, but I would also like to see Copenhagen, Helsinki, Oslo, at least those as relevant, and probably more locations. I mean, we're the only customer of Sunet Luleå, so that would be, or of NetNode Luleå, so that would be great if we can do some stuff in Luleå, but maybe not. It would be fun to see more locations than Stockholm mentioned here, and to actually answer the questions. How do you make a peering location good? Well, you need preferably more than one data center. I mean, you need more vendors so they can compete with each other. In Stockholm, we have 2 big vendors of data centers, so that's good. Then, of course, you need an exchange point. We have that here. We have that essentially in every other city. And of course, we need cost effective of those data centers. For example, I think New York is a good example of a totally broken market. That is so expensive to go there that is hard to do connectivity there. So everyone just does it outside of New York because they decided that it is a very one vendor over there. So going there is very expensive.
Yeah, I can just agree. But I think Stockholm is pretty much already sorted, in my opinion. We need to focus, like Hugge says, more on, for example, Copenhagen. There's a lot of both Swedish actors not connected to Copenhagen, even though Copenhagen is unavailable in Malmö as well. So a lot of traffic exchange in Sweden is going to Stockholm and back again. And we're missing CDN providers in Copenhagen or Malmö as well.
Yeah, that was actually one thing that I want to emphasize. This is a little bit of a chicken and egg problem, right? So operators want to have a good place to exchange traffic, and the eyeball operators can, as they typically do, exchange traffic. But the big amount of traffic is actually coming to the CDNs, as we talked about earlier, and I think that's something that's going to be basically a driver for being a large internet traffic exchange point.
So I think from our side, as you mentioned, so we want to make Stockholm successful, obviously, for interaction, but also working with internet exchanges and ISPs. But we also want to work with you, internet exchanges and so on, to develop, Copenhagen and other locations. So that's also important for us. How we do that jointly and get all the CDNs across and all the traffic across to Copenhagen without having to go back and forth in Stockholm, I guess, needs a little bit of joint work between, obviously the ISPs, internet exchanges and so on. So we're happy to try to facilitate that going forward.
Okay, great. So we've talked a little bit about locations. Let's sort of focus on some new markets. So there are clearly new markets opening up in the IX space. One could think of maybe enterprises, for example. What do you think are the needs of some of these new markets, and what would the challenges be in helping to serve them?
I'm not going to start on this one. I think this is an interaction question, I would say. Like, what do you mean with this?
I think it's also internet exchange related. So as you know, we work really closely with all the internet exchanges across the whole of our footprint. So, obviously NetNod very strongly in the Nordics. And talking to the internet exchanges, there's suddenly a strong appetite from some enterprises to understand what peering means. Before it's been kept away from the enterprises by the telcos saying, don't worry, Mr. Enterprise, we'll do the network for you, we'll do the IP transit for you and so on, so you don't have to worry about the peering. And suddenly we see all these banks or SIs and so on realizing that, I'm a bank, I've got also Apple on the other side on this internet exchange. I can do Apple Pay straight away instead of having to go via BT or other carriers. So there's a facilitation there. So that's what we're seeing. That was the question.
Right. So to answer that, first, I think there's way too many amateurs in this business. So introducing even more, I'm not sure about that. But of course, everyone, we have 1,000 customers over here, and it does look very nice that you have a lot of different customers. But we, the ISPs, since I'm here, I don't know, kind of representing some kind of ISP. It's not necessarily that we need every single enterprise to do their own peering. Of course, a few would probably be very beneficial to do it. Doing real internets is good. It is smart in many ways, and especially in a world now that now I'm going to use the devil's world here, but software-defined WAN, SD-WAN, right? You can build that yourself if you're an enterprise. You don't need to go to Verizon to buy a global layer 3 VPN service. You can do it yourself nowadays. So if you're good at doing internets, then it might be a good choice. But I don't know. I'm not at least seeing. Because every one of my customers is an enterprise, and they just want to get rid of the problem about doing internets. They just want ports that are really fast, that has all the Facebook and Googles and cat pictures coming to them in a very good manner, right? So I might be, very, very have like a tunnel blick or whatever it's called. I don't see where that's coming from. Of course, enterprise wants to run data centers, yes. But do they also want to partake in the global routing table doing peering? I'm not sure. Maybe.
It's just like you said, they don't have the knowledge for it. And if you're an enterprise and would like to go to an IX, yeah, sure. But with the low cost of transit today, why do you need to pair with, for example, Apple and Google when you can buy cheap transit from almost anyone today, which already probably have caches or other solution, and they have already fixed that?
Yeah, I agree as well. Because today here, also, throwing rocks in a glass house here, but transit has never been cheaper than it is today, and IXPs has never been more expensive than what they are today, even though that the IXP port price is going like this, right? But transit prices are, it's much steeper, right? So if it's a price thing, really hard, because also, when you buy transit, you buy per megabit. On an exchange port, you need to buy the whole thing immediately. So maybe that is something we also need to change in the future, but now the whole scene has decided that you buy full ports and you pay for the whole port, and on transit you most likely pay on a usage-based billing. So I would like to see what enterprise is gaining economical benefit of it. But of course, you can gain marketing benefit, which is still the most important thing for an IXP today.
So do you actually think that the business model needs to change this, or?
Yeah, I would like to. maybe becoming a bit internal here, but one of the most important things for me, for an IXP, is today marketing. That I can market that I am somewhere, right? That I can, if I need to be reached, I can be reached over here. And I can essentially leverage the whatever IXP's platform, like these type of meetings. They have a website. You can be on Puygrenier. Your entry looks really mighty on Puygrenier, all that kind of stuff. So for me as an ISP, it's important because if I look big, then other things I'm big. So then I can be friends with other big guys, right? Bit complicated story, but it is the truth, right? Because if I were really smart, I would probably only focus on getting 10 big peers and then buy rest of my capacity on transit. But then I would lose kind of the whole, community and the social thing here with peering, and also, of course, a bit of a qualitative aspect sometimes, I would say.
Okay, but so imagine that we actually get some clueful enterprises connecting, and they will send a peering request. Will you peer?
Of course. I almost peer with everyone in Scandinavia, at least.
I guess that was a wrong question.
If it's an American enterprise, I would of course say no, but Scandinavian, sure, no problem.
We have a pretty open policy as well, so if there are some traffic, most likely yes.
Okay, thank you. Next question. We're seeing the increasing kind of role of partnerships in the IX landscape. So partnerships between, for example, data centers and internet exchanges. What do you think the role of partnerships is going to be as we move forward? Anyone?
So from our side, as Peter mentioned before, and the main richness of a data center world is built on connectivity. So, we want to make sure that we work really closely with internet exchanges, with other carriers, with all the ISPs, CDNs. That's what makes a data center really rich. Obviously, as Peter also mentioned, we are very neutral, so we have to be really careful about not, favoring any specific parties. However, we work really closely with people like NetNod, with people like, the London Internet Exchange, and so on and so forth, to understand, where the trends are going, how we can improve the services in a data center, how we can work together on specific projects, and so on. So for us, it's really critical. The partnership word might be, a little bit too strong if you look at neutrality. However, very critical for us in terms of a data center to be connectivity rich and to be working closely with these guys. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I need to comment on that. So I rarely commend anyone for doing anything good, but I think Interaction is doing a really good job here. It is my favorite data center right now, this week at least. No, but I mean, this also comes back to the point that what enables a really good peering location, and it is that we have vendor-neutral data centers or carrier-neutral data centers that doesn't interfere with people's business, whatever the business are. I mean, a data center's role, in my opinion, in the world, is to provide space, racks, power, cross-connects, and some kind of security around the building. And it would be nice also if there was a coffee machine, that would be nice. And I can get engineers in 24/7. And if I don't have engineers, I can call a clueful engineer at the data center that's charged by the hour and helps me out. So that is, for me, the product I want to buy. And that is also the cue. We need to address the elephant in the room. In this case, also called Evil Corp, sometimes recognized as Equinix. So the thing here is that it is the least carrier-neutral data center that tries to be a carrier-neutral data center. Without giving Interaction any fame here, but they are going to be a problem very, very soon to how we conduct business. Because they of course like everyone as their customer. That is obvious. Who doesn't like money, right? Everyone likes money. So everyone is, of course, welcome to be a customer. But they're also selling essentially every other service an ISP sells. They're also selling. And what will happen and is, for example, a thing like cross connects. So the only thing I care about now these days is cross connects, essentially. I mean, I build PNIs. That is how I build out connectivity. I'm big enough so that I can motivate 10 gig PNIs to almost whatever. I mean, if you have 500 megabit of traffic with me, a 10 gig PNIs makes sense. That is a very cost-effective way for me to get rid of my traffic. So cross connects is on top of my list here on the first column in my mighty Excel sheet. So what will happen is, for example, a big data center provider could be Equinix, could be someone else, will of course spike the price on cross connects for us, but to their own services it will be included. So for me, that's a definition of not being carrier neutral. So I'm just here to give a warning finger about that winter is coming, right? So I would love to do cross connect server interaction as long as you keep the prices low. I mean, that's going to be very important in the future. And that is how I decide data centers these days. I mean, what type of cross connects do they do? What do they cost? How many can I get for this amount of pricing? And are they correctly installed? It costs me so much money to do them. Yeah, I see there's a few customers over there that has done good cross connects in Bromma maybe. But you know, it cost me, 3 years worth of that cross connect if it's wrong from the beginning. So accuracy is a key, right? Sorry for making a monologue of this. Sorry.
But to add on that, the Equinix thing is the same with their IX, which is basically free cross connect if you connect to it, which is, in my opinion, illegal competition since you have to pay to connect to any other IX. That's not.
It's not a legal competition, but it's not carrier neutral.
It's not carrier neutral. I think it's.
Any more comments on that question? No. Okay. What do you think should be done? This is for everyone on the panel. What should be done to help make things easier for peering communities as we move forward?
First of all, I am going to talk a little bit about things that maybe not too much about us, but for example, peering DB is one thing that has happened and is improving very much to the peering community, and I think also automation for setting up peering and is something that's really important, and we should try to emphasize that it's a good thing and improve. Another thing that we should try to do is also make everybody put in their routing information and route objects in the RIR databases so that we can make sure that we build a better and more stable internet and start filtering and yeah.
So from a non-internet exchange person, we do get a lot of requests from external European people who want to come and peer in Europe to say, why is it so difficult to have to go to NetNode, to AMSIX, to DKIX, to Links when we want to peer in Europe? So we have had the question quite a few times on, is there any way that there could be a federation of internet exchanges? And I understand the competition and so on, which is usually what we go back with, but some sort of federation of internet exchanges to make it easier for non-Europeans to come and peer in Europe.
So
question.
I don't know. I at least know 100 people on top of my head, which only job is to go around the world and evangelize about how to do peering in Europe. I mean, every IXP has at least like 1, 2, 5 guys that does this. So how can you have avoided them? I mean, I can't avoid them. I mean, if I go somewhere, they come from every direction, right? But I think what you could say to them, right, if you get that type of customers coming and having those problems, is attend any of these meetings, either this meeting or any NOG like NLNOG, UKNOG, iNOG, I don't know. Yeah, EPF and GPF, of course, but those are kind of specialized events for people that has already been evangelized, essentially. So that is, it's in Swedish it's called the Club of Inbördes Beundran, essentially, or Gentleman's Club, or whatever it is, that everyone just sits there and tap each other's back. But these NOGs, I think, is the enabler of getting a community going and also getting into the community in a very, very quick manner. Because I think, like, people in general here are very welcoming and like to help people into the business.
I do agree, and I think that even if the pairing community is sort of a closed by invite by being their thing,
like the Illuminati, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I did have a discussion with one of our customers that recently tried to improve their pairing footprint in the Nordics, which is an international customer of ours, and that customer told us that it's actually hard to try to get information and talk to operators and get pairing from them.
Yeah, I totally agree that the operators are hard to get hold of, right? I mean, the older they are, the harder it is to get hold of them. So I'm not sure how we do it. I mean, I have pretty good contact with all the operators, but I can totally see that it is hard for others to get that, because operators has been doing this for 30 years. I think the operators are kind of bored. I mean, that's at least my take on it.
But imagine this is one of the big ones, and actually trying to pair with everybody, not only the big old guys, but also the new young guns. And it's apparently it's quite hard to actually get pairing.
As someone come from Comhem, which recently built up all the pairing from scratch, basically, what really helped us was actually start going on events like these. Like you mentioned earlier, NetNode, EPF. You get a face on someone and you kind of email them directly instead of the pairing which basically goes nowhere. You have to approach people in these events. For example, the Russian people, they don't come to you, you have to go to them. And I think they're going to have to use the same methodology, taking contact, going to someone, ask, see, we have some traffic, would you like to pair? And the answer is 90% of the times yes.
Yeah, that I guess is true, right? I mean, and also going to the Russian events are kind of fun, right? So it's not a bad thing, right? But it is an interesting thing that we're working with connecting things digitally, and the way we do it is by meeting non-digitally to enable it. It's kind of like ironic in a way that the most effective way of enabling digital connections is to meet over a beer. It's like, but it's always been like that. It's kind of weird.
Beer solves everything.
Okay, I think we'll find consensus on that one. So this next question is fairly open-ended, so if you could try and be quite brief in your answers, if possible, just for the sake of time. Are there any conditions specific to the Nordic region that you think we should focus on moving forward?
So from a data center point of view, I think the gateway model has been successful so far, and I see, or we've seen as Interaction as something that's attracted the Nordics as being a focal point. The other thing that we've seen, and from being in telco world for at least 120 years or even more, most of the new technology or any new technology in the world of telco has always seemed to be started around the Nordics. With the mobile phones, the 1G, 4G, whatever testing and so on. So keeping that strong, innovative side of things, I think, is quite important for the Nordics to stay ahead.
Yeah, I do agree, and Nordics has both a good placing in some sense and a really bad placing in other senses. If you look geographically, we are sort of as you said, the gateway to the east, to Russia and other parts of the country. We are also actually located where it's actually quite cold most of the time of the year. So actually, quite a lot of data centers actually establishing here, and that's not maybe too bad, even if it's cold over half time of the year. And also one other thing is that the internet to the home is actually both very, very established here, and the average connection bandwidth is also quite high. So typically, if you look at some stats, you probably see that over 80-90% is actually streaming high definition video to their home, which also increases the bandwidth uses.
Okay, any other comments on that from the panel? If not, I will open up the floor to questions. So there's been quite some interesting discussion here, not complete agreement. So let's hear any questions from any of the panelists on anything we've talked about so far. Just raise your hand. Don't be shy. Thank you, Michael.
Michael Abrahamson. So Jeff Houston keeps saying a lot of stuff. For instance, that transit is dead. I would postulate that we are part of taking over what used to be done in cable networks, like antenna networks and so on, for TV distribution. That's increasing our share of the video market. Ignoring transit means that we're dumping everything that made the internet successful to begin with. Even though it might be flat in traffic levels, the amount of traffic, it's still a very important path for new innovation. And we don't want to lock ourselves into just taking whatever is hosted at the 5-7 biggest CDNs. So I think we should be very careful so we don't end up in a situation where we're trying to be AOL or trying to just show a very narrow view of the world. And I hope everybody still thinks the same way, but I think it's dangerous to say transit is dead and transit is not important. Transit is so small because it means that some people might neglect it, and that's going to throw out the baby with the.
Well, we still kind of need to tell the truth, right? I mean, that of course you are correct that we can't have 10 islands of internet during the world, right? I mean, everything still needs to be connected in one internet because we only have one internet, right? So that is of course true, but the way of people using the internet has changed. I mean, if I have an old grandma in, for example, Vietnam, my computer doesn't communicate with her by sending bits directly to her computer. We're probably sending it through some intermediate service in the middle. We might use Skype, we might use WhatsApp Messenger or whatever. That's not a peer-to-peer thing. So of course it is still important that we have reachability globally, but the data doesn't lie that it is not being used as much as before. I mean, I have less traffic now than a year ago to Australia, although my overall traffic has grown with, 300 gigs a second. So
right. But so let's take there are a few, for instance, online games that are still peer-to-peer. They actually rely on the players being able to communicate directly, even though some of the setup might be done via server and so on. So even though the amount of traffic might look like, oh, it's nothing, it is actually still important. Just because the rest of your traffic volume has grown, that doesn't mean that is a 20 megabit 4K stream worth, what is it, 200 times more than this 100K gaming session? I don't think it is. I think they're worth the same amount. So just because the amount of traffic is low doesn't mean we should ridicule it. I think some people are doing that and saying it's no longer important.
Well, obviously, like the CDNs will ridicule it all the time because it's part of their business strategy to do it, of course. So naturally they will say like that because they want better pricing and also they want everyone to be directly connected to them. But for an ISP to ISP traffic, of course, it is still important, but it is certainly not the most important thing to chase after because you still need to chase after how to solve the big things here. I mean, the things that people are actually complaining about. And I totally get your thing about the gaming part. Sure, that is important, but the amount of peer-to-peer traffic between telcos, I can't see that it's how it's going to go up. Because the telcos also are doing stuff in the cloud and that kind of things. They're putting, whatever happens with 5G, right? We don't know. It's probably going to be a clusterfuck. That is the only thing we know, right? So, how to solve it though? How can?
No, I'm not saying you need to change. So now I'm on the panel, basically. Sorry.
You always are. Anyway.
But just even though it's it still needs to work.
Oh, definitely,
and
for sure.
So I think it's dangerous we have to think about how we say this. To say, yes, the traffic volume is small, but it is still important and needs to work. Because otherwise we will not have the type of innovation we have had historically, because the people can't innovate because the CDNs are going to be gatekeepers.
Just to add on that gaming thing, as we have, like mentioned earlier, a lot of residential customers, we're always hunting those latency and delay timers because it's very important for our customers, and they need close reachability to all the game servers. And most of the gaming companies, Blizzard, Valve, Riot, have peering in Europe, even in Stockholm, some of them. And if you play with someone online, basically what you refer to this peer-to-peer, normally it's time zone based. Europeans play with Europeans, basically. And most of the traffic is actually exchanged over an IX or a PNI in our case.
Question at the front here, please.
I just want to offer a suggestion to combine something we learned today. You were looking for traffic in Durio, and I just calculated here that if you take the guy with the cows and we put those transponders on the reindeers, if you have 277 billion reindeers, it's a 10 gig.
I'd gladly pair with that network in Luleå any day, dude.
Hello, I'm Olle Johansson, sitting here with many, many hats. One of them is the TU Foundation. And you scare me a bit. Many, many years ago, being an old guy, I remember us talking about internet being an infrastructure for the society, for a lot of society services. And you're confirming that you have driven us to a walled garden with cat movies and other things. We built the internet for entertainment, bringing all the traffic down to Stockholm, which is bad for things we want to do and the society want to do. E-health, IoT, self-driving cars, all Peter's reindeers, all of that stuff. If we have 10 content providers only and we skip the rest of the peering and the transit, we will never get there in a way that we can accept as a stable network for those services. And of course, switching hats, peer-to-peer telephony wouldn't work, or WebRTC, which is the new fancy thing. We would bring all the WebRTC down to Stockholm or to Copenhagen, which wouldn't be good for latency or conversations. I really think that what you're saying here strengthens our view from the foundation that we really, as a community, all of us here in the room, need to focus on how to get back to a grid, how to get back to something that we as technicians can stand up and say, this is good enough for e-health, this is good enough for IT, this is gonna take care of all those services we're gonna depend on. And when you've done that, I can safely sit in the back seat of my car and let the car drive itself. But I really think we need to focus on those questions. And I think, Hugge, you have some things to say about that.
Well,
Thank
I
you.
mean, depending on who you ask, right? I mean, if you get the Amazon salespeople here, they would say it's fine. Just put it in AWS and it's all good, right? I mean, put it in the cloud. Hello, sir. Can I tell you about the cloud? I mean, it's like, you know, they come knocking at the door as Jehovah's, right? So, and giving out the book about the cloud. It's like, hello, sir. So, so that will work for a lot of applications, but maybe not for all of them, right? And nothing is gone, right? I mean, it's the whole stability of the internet is still there, but if we only, you know, I mean, obviously I'm telling ghost stories here, right? That is kind of part of the equation here. That if we only focus on volume, which we are kind of doing, like ISPs, they market the volume. It's like, oh, we hit a new mark with great volumes. It's like, all right, that's a whole pool of 1 terabit of Netflix data. Who cares about that, right? So we need to invent something so we can prove other types of quality than, yes, a lot of bits goes over these big pipes. It's like, there's no one that cares about latency anymore. I mean, this whole bredbandskollen thing, right? I mean, that is not showing anything. It's just showing about that you can upload or download a big file to a server in Stockholm. So like that doesn't prove absolutely nothing. What would be interesting in the future is, can people from Säffle, how long does it take for them to reach 100 different places in Sweden, for example? That will be interesting, but who's going to pay for it? Are you going to pay for it? I'm not going to. So.
And also, I think that you're partly right, but and the focus has been on the big traffic here, and what we haven't talked about at all is actually the operators is actually appearing typically, except if you're one of the big ones that actually want to earn money on getting traffic from other operators. So I don't think it's really that bad as you sort of are afraid that it is, but it's somewhere in between, I think.
We should also, this is just theoretical examples, we won't get rid of transit, for example. They will always be there, but the traffic volumes will decrease heavily. Yeah.
Okay. As a very interesting panel, thank you for the feedback from the floor. Thank you very much.